Hello everyone, welcome to Luis Discusses Everything. I'm coming out here with a new video. In this video today, I wanted to give you my prediction for the 2022 House election or the House midterm elections in the United States. So I did promise this like a while back. I did say I was going to do like a prediction video, but now I finally have it. So I'm sharing the screen right now. I'm sharing the 538 forecast because I think it's probably the best forecast to look at the House and where it's going. And as you can see, the Republicans are favored to win the House. I had mentioned that in a previous short video, but here it is in plain view, and I'm going to go into detail as to why that is happening. So according to the 538 model, the Republicans have an 80% chance to win the House, right? And I'm not going to look at the camera all the time because I am right now sharing the screen from my computer. So I want to pay attention to what I'm doing. So in the screen, you see that the Republicans are favored to win the House by 80%. So that means in 80% of scenarios, Republicans win the House. And they need a total of 218 seats to actually achieve that, which it's not that hard considering the landscape that we have present, right? And 538 kind of does like a pretty good summary as to like what is the state of the political landscape in the United States, right? So according to 538, they have two big points that summarize the political landscape. Quote, things have improved for Democrats in the House, even though they are still underdogs. Following the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, polls for the race for Congress have itched towards Democrats. The question now is whether that shift will last or if the polls will shift back towards Republicans, as historically speaking, the party not in the White House does better in the midterms. So what 538 is alluding to is the fact that, and I have mentioned this in another video, is that during midterm years, the party in power, that means the party who is on top on the White House, usually loses the midterms, either the House or the Senate or both, right? It has happened in most midterms in U.S. history, with the exception of FDR and the exception of George W. Bush Jr. The reason it happened with FDR was because of the New Deal, which brought together the New Deal legislation, which brought together Social Security, etc. Back in the Great Depression. The other one happened with George W. Bush right after 9/11. He had a historic approval rating, and the country was pretty united on that, so it happened during that time. Those were the only two times in which the party in power, or the party who holds the presidency, won the midterm elections. Now, in terms of what does the House forecast say? In addition to the fact that Republicans have an 80% chance of winning. Well, it also says that the map has changed, right? Because in 2020, we had the decade, what happens every decade, which is the census. And in the census, they go through population data, which determines then how many seats every state has. And in this new map that you see in front of you, you have a much different landscape, right? There's this element called gerrymandering, which has sadly affected how the House is shaped up. So if you don't know, gerrymandering is writing up districts by legislatures controlled by either Republicans or Democrat, around voters that they think will favor them during House election years, right? So let's say, for example, Democrats are favored in suburban areas, right? If I am a Republican state legislator in any state, and I see that Democrats are favored in one city, then I'll make one district around that city instead of multiple districts around the city, right? Democrats do the same thing. They just did it in New York. They did it, if I'm not mistaken, in California and whatnot. Republicans have done it in multiple states that they control, including Georgia, Wisconsin, where they control the legislatures. Now, why is this long explanation important? Because it helps us understand the current landscape. If you see the map here, you'll see areas shaded in dark blue, areas shaded in lighter blue, even lighter blue, shaded in white, light red, even lighter red, and darker red. So the darker colors represent either solid Democrat or solid Republican. The slightly lighter red represents leaning towards that, towards either Democrat or Republican. The much lighter red or blue represents areas that are just tilt, that either go from one area or the other by a very small margin. And the ones in white are pure toss-up seats that they could go either way, and there's no way of determining which side it will go, right? So letting us be guided by those numbers, you can see that Republicans have 197 seats, which are solid. Democrats have 160 seats, which are solid. So the Republicans already have that advantage there. 27, which are likely on the Democratic side. 12, which are likely on the Republican side. 10, which are lean R on the Republican side. And 13, which are lean D, which means lean Democrat, obviously on the Democratic side. And then 16, which are toss-up. For contrast, I don't know if I have the details here. No, I do not have the details here. But for contrast, in the last time we had, or the last map, we had far more seats which were competitive, not 16, definitely around 30. And now we have much less toss-up seats, which means that it's going to be incredibly hard for either party to take control of the Senate. But in this specific scenario, it is going to be especially hard for the Democrats, not the Senate, sorry, the House. It's going to be especially hard for the Democrats to win the House, simply because of the fact that the Republicans have so many seats which are lean heavily in favor of them, that it would only take very few amount of seats, in fact only 3 seats, for them to capture the majority, which in a lean red year, which is supposed to be this one, would not be hard for them to attain. On the Democratic side, it would be like, even if they win all of their solid Ds, the likely D, and the lean D, they would still need to win all of the toss-ups. Plus, if you notice, not only all of the toss-ups, but they will also need to win some of the lean Rs, which means they would need to convince a number of Republicans or lean Republicans to cross to their side. And in a Republican wave year, if you're a Democratic politician, that will be very hard to do. Unless you actually pass measures which would help the country as a whole. But anyway, so you can see, now that you have a better picture, you can see why it's so heavily lopsided in favor of the Republicans. Not only are there like Republican wave year, but it's also the map structurally is heavily in favor of Republican candidates, simply because the maps are drawn around areas which historically have favored Republican politicians around the country. That's why you see so much red on the map. Now scrolling down, you can see where the 538 forecast gets their percentage outcomes. And most of these areas, just like the map, are shaded red, indicating what is the likeliest outcome, right? So 80% of outcomes fall within this black range that you see right here, with the maximalist possibilities on either side of that range. So Republicans, the maximalist side, or the most that they can capture within this range, is 252 seats, versus the Democrats' best scenario would be a 224 seat. So it's like, even in the best case scenario for Democrats, it's only 224 seats, which is not much more than what they have now, right? Now, the same thing happens in this chart, and the same thing is happening in this chart. Now, one notable caveat for Democrats is the fact that up until recently, the political background or the political scene has been changing heavily in favor of the Democratic Party, right? We have seen that example in the Senate, which Democrats have 60% chance of capturing, but now you're seeing it in the House, and you see it right here on the chart. Chances of controlling the Senate just a few months ago, Republicans almost had a 90% chance of capturing the Senate, right? Which meant that Democrats only had a 12% chance. Now you have an 80-20 scenario in which Republicans have an 80% chance, like I mentioned before, and Democrats a 20% chance. That is an 8% bump for the Democratic Party. Now you may think, yeah, Republicans are still on top. Yes, but in a Republican red wave year, this shouldn't be happening. Or at least, historically speaking, it shouldn't. Right? And this is because the reason this has been changing it's because of a number of issues, and the website already mentioned it up top, which is the Dobbs decision. So Roe versus Wade being overturned. It has been the series of bills that have passed, like the Anti-Inflation Act, like the CHIPS Act, also the PACS Act, which an upcoming video, I will have an upcoming video on that one, which is related to veterans. I think you will like to see it. And all those things combined have favored the Democrats up until now, right? It's still August, and we still have time for things to change. And up here, in this segment over here, I'm moving on, right? You have who's up in those competitive districts, the districts that could go either one way or the other. And in most of these districts, unfortunately for the Democrats, the Republicans are ahead. But that is steadily changing. And this is why the Democrats are going up on the House election. Because you see with every new poll that Democratic incumbents in these competitive districts, and also Democratic challengers to Republican candidates, are showing better results in the polls. Notable to say the least. So in summary, Republicans are still ahead in the House. I think that Republicans are still going to capture the House. But because I think it will take a monumental shift in the future, in the next coming months, for this whole thing to change. I don't think it's going to take something much more substantial for the Democrats to actually win the House. I still think they're going to win the Senate, the Democrats, but the House, I think at this point, is a foregone conclusion. Who knows? I could be surprised, but up until now, in the month of August, I think the Democrats are not favored to take the House. The Republicans are. So, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel. Share this video with your friends, and if you thought this was interesting, please leave a comment below. If you didn't think it was interesting, also leave a comment below, and I'll see you on the next video.